Welcome to the Gracefully Wild Soul podcast. I am Kirsten, and I am so incredibly grateful to be here with you today. Welcome to episode number 1. Today, we are going to rewind the clock. We're going to go back in time and talk a bit about my journey and my path to arrive here and to bring the soul babe into the world. So let's dive in. Welcome to the Gracefully Wild Soul podcast. I'm Kirsten, a mother and soul guide, and this is a space where your soul is witnessed and the frequency of your heart is felt. Together, we will have intimate conversations about the essence of life, the beauty of your soul's path, and our evolution as women and as mothers. Through channeled words, lived experiences, and the wisdom of nature's rhythms, the soul, and the sacred feminine, this is where the gracefully wild woman begins to rise. I want to take you back almost 10 years, so back to 2017. It's wild to think that it's been almost 10 years, but it has. So 2017 is where I began my motherhood journey. And I start here because this was the moment that I began my self-healing journey. But I had no idea that that's what was happening in my life. Motherhood was the catalyst to my healing because I knew I wanted to do something different for my children than what I had had. I knew that I wanted to raise my children as emotionally intelligent humans. I wanted to raise them in a creative fashion. I wanted them to be able to feel like they could self-express and just be authentically whoever they wanted to be and whoever they were. Let me set the stage of why this was the catalyst for my vision of motherhood. I was raised in a very logical, fact-based family. Both of my parents are attorneys. My grandfather on my mom's side is a judge, and most of my mom's side of the family were all involved in the law. And so this was the way that I was raised. This was the lens of life as I knew it growing up. Conversations did revolve around the world and law and politics, and just from a very objective point of view and fact-based point of view, none of it bad, but just a different lens of life and the way that you see life. And so this was primarily the energy that I was raised around and with. It wasn't to say that self-expression and creativity wasn't part of my childhood or wasn't part of my story, because it very much was. Both of my grandparents on my dad's side were artists. They were painters and photographers. And so art was also present in my life, but it wasn't honed in on like the law. The law was such a huge part of my upbringing and my life that it overtook a huge part of the conversation. And so the idea of self-expression and authenticity just wasn't part of the everyday conversation. It wasn't something that was necessarily celebrated. It wasn't something that was looked upon as courageous and brave and exciting. It was just kind of, I guess, downplayed is the best way to describe it. So when I became a mom, I really just wanted that deeper connection. And, emotions were also not something that were celebrated in my upbringing. And they certainly weren't in the times. In society, I was an 80s baby, right? And a, tween in the 90s. Conversations around raising emotionally intelligent children were not happening in the 80s and 90s. Very different conversations were happening. And so it just wasn't part of my upbringing. It wasn't part of a generational upbringing. And it was something that I wanted as part of my family life. I wanted to raise my children in that manner. I wanted them to be emotionally aware and able to process and move through their emotions and express them. And I wanted to be able to receive them. That was the self healing moment that I didn't know was happening. I knew in that moment that I wanted to open my heart and open myself to my children and receive whatever it is that they were going through with open arms. And so this was an internal conversation that I was having. But nonetheless, I was also, reading books and researching. I was reading The Whole Brain Child and diving into all of the different facets of how we activate, the hearts and minds of children and how you create that connection between parent and child. That was really important to me in my motherhood journey. And so 2017 rolls around and I drop into the throes of motherhood. Like any mother can tell you, you are in the thick of it with feeding and sleeping. And honestly, you're in it. You're doing laundry, you're cleaning bottles, you're trying to figure out the schedule, what works, what doesn't work, all of those things. And for the first time in my life, I had actually never had this moment. I had never really not worked. And so I took maternity leave for longer than I had anticipated. I had originally planned for 3 months, but that got extended to about 5. And so what I didn't kind of tie in yet to this story was that you've heard about my family being in the law. And what you didn't hear was that ultimately that was the path that I also chose. So in 2017, when I took maternity leave, I took leave from a law firm. I was actively practicing law at the time. I had active litigations that were going on. And so when I took maternity leave, not only stepping away from work for the first time, I was stepping away from a very active profession and an active caseload. So, slowing down and coming into the throes of motherhood brought up so many questions and so many inquiries that I didn't know were happening deep inside at the time. I once again knew that I wanted to raise my children differently. I wanted to have this emotional connection with them. But what I didn't know was that deep down inside, as I was beginning to mother my daughter and go through these challenges of feeding and sleeping and all of these other things that we go through in motherhood, that I was being challenged internally, that I was seeing and feeling and experiencing emotions that I hadn't experienced since I was a kid. And I was struggling. I look back now on that moment, and I most certainly had some sort of postpartum anxiety and, a hint of postpartum depression. But in the moment, I didn't really connect those two. I didn't think that anything was so severe that I had any hint of postpartum depression or anxiety. I just thought, oh, this is just kind of, you know, how life is after you become a mom. You're challenged with all of these different things, and you are learning to navigate and get through them for your child and for yourself. And so I did notice in the moments of really difficult times that I was going to a really dark place. And that place felt like I'm not good enough. I'm not worthy. I can't do what I'm supposed to do as a mother. This idea of failure, or I'm not performing. I know that word sounds completely out of place in this conversation about motherhood, but that's what I felt deep inside, was like, I'm not performing, like I'm not meeting expectations. I'm not doing or able to do the things that all the books say I should be able to do, or that, the milestones that my daughter should be at. And I internalized that deeply. So I don't really process it all, right? I don't really understand it all in the moment. The only thing I know, the only thing that I'm familiar with is my old pre-child self. And I think that most moms go through this experience. And this is a common response. We grasp for what we know. And in the moment, I was grasping for what I knew. I was grasping for my job. I was seeking to get back to work as soon as possible. And I felt very conflicted that I couldn't get back sooner than 5 months. So I end up getting back to work between the 4 to 5 month postpartum marker. My daughter goes to daycare because we don't have family in the area. And this is the only childcare that we were able to secure. And as every mother goes through this experience, we have some mixed emotions that are coming up as we go back to work and as maybe we are leaving our little one with someone. Maybe it's a family member or they're going into some sort of childcare facility. And I was having those mixed emotions as well. But I knew when I got back to work that I had a place in the world. I instantly felt like I could just, turn it back on. Like, okay, I'm back. Here I am. Let's go full throttle. Let's hop right back into this litigation. I will, take on the motions. I will take the depositions. I will go into all the things I need to do as I had been doing it before. And so I began to turn up the dial. And about a month or so into being back at work, so I'm now about 6 months postpartum, I find out that I am pregnant for a second time. And I am completely shocked. I, like my husband, were not expecting to be pregnant that quickly. And I, at the moment, am so confused. I'm confused and lost feeling, not because I wanted it to be anything different than what it was. It was because I felt this profound failure. And so instantly I went back to that place, that feeling that I had stuffed away when I went back to work, of not being good enough, of failing, of not being able to meet the expectations of other people, and essentially not being a good mom. I was so baffled how I could be trusted and gifted this second opportunity to become a mom when I had failed so miserably at being a mom to my first daughter. This was genuinely the thought that was running through my mind. I didn't think I could do it. I thought that I had just completely failed at motherhood. And so when I found out I was pregnant with my second daughter, I began to go back and navigate through those feelings that I had shut myself off from. But it was still very surface level. I was not going to the depths that I needed to go to. I just knew that I had to accept and know that I had done enough, that I was a good mom, that I was going to be able to do this a second time. And this beautiful child, this soul, came to me in this moment, on this timeline, for a precise reason. And so fast forward a little bit to 2018, when I welcomed my second daughter into this world. And I knew that life after that was going to be different. I didn't know how, and I didn't know what was about to unfold, but I just knew that life was going to look and be different. And it was. I mean, the reality was that it was very different. I had a brand new baby and I had a 14-month-old baby. I had two babies in very different stages of their growth and development. And I was in this kind of very in between space of motherhood, having maybe not fully settled into motherhood with my first, and jumping right back into pregnancy and going through postpartum again. But I did have a different lens. And I did want to continue to approach motherhood in a different way. And so I once again was catalyzed to come back to the thoughts that I had when I became a mom in 2017. I came back to this emotional connection, this conversation around emotional intelligence. And I began to understand that I had to go deeper. Like I had to dive into the place that I had really been avoiding when I became a mom for the first time. And I did. I started to dig in a bit and began to open space and settle into not rushing back to work, settling in that I was doing a good job, that I was a good mom, and that these beautiful girls were meant to be my daughters and I was meant to be their mom. And it was such a gift. And so I really began to settle into that. But life continued to truck along, and I ultimately went back to my job. So I went once again back into my cases and started picking up the practice in 2018. So I was actively in my job and just navigating motherhood as we all do. Once again, it was like diapers, sleeping, all of the things, the ups and downs, the roller coasters, the joys, the laughs, the challenges. I was in it. And fast forward a bit, we land at the end of 2019. So, the end of 2019, I, in all honesty, am tired. I am juggling motherhood. I am juggling my job as a litigator, trying to hold both worlds together and maybe even here and there find space and time for myself, continuing to nurture my marriage. If you're a mom, you know exactly what I'm speaking to. And the end of 2019 came along, and my husband had this opportunity presented to him through a friend. He was introduced to this person that does meditation, like 3-day immersive meditation experiences slash trainings. And so he asked, he's like, hey, do you want to do this with me? And I was like, yes. And, at the time, once again, we're 3 years into parenting, right? Like we need to do things together. We need to continue to nurture our marriage and our connection. And so I am being, a curious person. I'm open to new experiences and different religions and spiritual experiences. I was like, yeah, let's do it. So this person came to our house and did a 3-day immersive meditation experience where we essentially learned to meditate. And this meditation experience was focused on mantra meditation. And I wasn't familiar with that kind of meditation. I had never experienced it or heard about it, but I was open, once again, open to the experience. And my husband and I go through this training slash kind of immersive experience together. And so we actually have some individual experiences with the person that is training us. And then we also have some experiences together, right? And so at the time, I am really just trying to take it all in. I'm just open to understanding what this is all about and just learning something completely new. And I go through this meditation because she has us actually actively meditate in front of her and just explain kind of what's happening for us or ask questions. And I begin to just open myself to seeing what's possible and what is beginning to come through in this moment. I begin to let go of control and I trust this person, this guide that's taking me through this meditative experience and this journey. Nonetheless, I still find myself holding back in the way that I describe my experience. So I'm kind of giving her little clues and pieces of information about my experience, but I'm not fully allowing myself to be seen. And that's for two reasons. One, I have nothing to compare it to. I had never meditated. I, of course, knew about meditation, but really didn't know what people's experiences were like internally. And two, I was still so much caught up in this life of performance and perfectionism and really control that I couldn't let go. I couldn't release the control. And so we conclude this experience and say goodbye to our guide and the person that's training us after we get this Vedic astrology reading. And she, basically reads me. She reads my energy. She reads my chart. And so much of what she says resonates and hits spot on. But at this time, I'm still fully immersed in this very logical living life, right? Checking the boxes, being married, having the professional career, having two kids, owning a home, really just living that, kind of magazine type of life, right? The life that I was raised to want, that our culture encouraged, have that safety and security, live a life full of safety and security, invest in your 401k. Just that conversation kept happening in my head, right? And so I wasn't fully allowing myself to be free with her or with myself. And that takes me forward into 2020 when I begin to meditate regularly and the experience begins to change and open up. And I begin to open up as well. We're going to wrap this here for episode 1 and come back with episode 2, picking up right where we left off. Thank you, love, for being here. May you walk forward guided by the wild wisdom of your soul and the truth of your heart. To find me beyond the podcast, you can join my newsletter at soulbabe.com for continual updates on offerings and other teachings, or subscribe to the Gracefully Wild Soul Substack. Until next time.